righty, welcome to Chartloop's MEDDPICC series. I'm here with Craig Rajpal. Today we are doing our second session, diving into MEDDPICC and specifically identifying pain. So Craig, tell us a little bit about this. This is going to be our first kind of deep dive into MEDDPICC. Why are we starting with the I, which is way deep in here? Give it to us.
Absolutely. So great to be here again, Sean. So last discussion that we had, we talked about MEDDPICC holistically, how organizations use it, why salespeople themselves, sales reps like myself, get value out of utilizing MEDDPICC in their sales process. Today, we're going to be starting with the start of the process, right? So you're right. The I in MEDDPICC is further down the funnel, but it's combined with the earlier part of the sales process, which is discovery. This is when you're interacting with a customer, when you're just trying to share with them the value you bring to the table. And why the identification of pain, the identified pain, is so critically important is, well, we'll talk about that in just a second detail, but at a very holistic level, without pain, there is really no deal. So Sean, if you want to go on to the next one.
Absolutely.
So if I think of the father of MEDDPICC, if you will, right, John McMahon, Sean and I are both massive fans of John McMahon. There's no question about it, right? He wrote this book called A Qualified Sales Leader. I think if you're in sales or if you're a sales leader or work with go-to-market teams, you should definitely pick up a copy. John has these three specific questions from an identification of pain perspective that the rep should answer for themselves, and the sales leadership should ask the rep as well. Those three questions are: firstly, why do anything? What is the catalyst? What is the event? What is making the customer go out and make a change? Because essentially that's what's happening. Why customer has pain in the first place, right? So if we go back to our Salesforce analogy, right, and somebody trying to buy Salesforce, a CRM as a system of record, it could be bad data. It could be collaboration among the sales team. It could be analytics and forecasting for the leadership team, right? So why do anything in the first place? The other thing, and I think this is really critical, this is where you see when you're in a real opportunity or a real sales cycle and you lose the deal, this is a very important question for every sales rep and the sales leaders to answer, which is, why do they have to buy from Salesforce? Why couldn't they go to Copper, or why couldn't they go to Microsoft Dynamics, which also sell their own CRM products, right? What is it fundamentally unique about Salesforce that helps solve that problem that no other competitor could? Is it Salesforce is a fully cloud native tool? Nah, that wouldn't work. So is Microsoft Dynamics. Is it Salesforce has the easiest to use UI? Nah, that wouldn't work. Copper would say they have that. Is it, Salesforce has the most extensive reporting capability? Yeah, that probably would work because Salesforce does actually have that. So understanding the specific thing that matters to the customer, to the prospect, if they care about that one thing that only you can uniquely solve, that's incredibly important to know at the start of the sales cycle. What this would mean is when you close to the end, if you're in the mid-market, if it's in 4 months, or if you're enterprise, if it's in a year, and you have that win, that would come from the very start. And then, especially with enterprise sales cycles or even mid-market ones, you'll have what's called laggards, the deals that take just forever to close, right? And the question is, the third one is, why buy now, right? And that one is very much about, if this organization does not buy Salesforce in the next 90 days or the next 180 days, what is the implication, or what is the consequence? What is the dollar consequence of not making that decision today? And that's really talking about the negative implications of this. Is the lack of collaborations across reps costing them $1 million a quarter? Is the ability not being able to forecast their sales costing them X dollar amount? That's exactly the implication you need to identify at the discovery and the scoping phase from a metrics perspective, so that when the customer, when you're closer to the end, the customer says, oh, you know what, we're busy, let's talk again in 90 days. You have that information in your hand to share with the customer to kind of open their eyes a little bit too, that here's the implication of not solving the problem today.
Yeah, very cool. You know what I really liked about this framework of John was that this is like a diagnostic, similar to a doctor. It's like if you want to come in, right, if reps or a company as a whole is having trouble with, you know, hitting the number, let's kind of scan, right? Let's scan your book of business and see what's going on. But and then if you honestly ask these 3 questions about every deal and you dive into there, that will give you a very good answer. Is this like total nonsense, or is there a real opportunity here? And are we gonna hit on our number? So question here, Craig, on
Can you hear me, Sean?
yeah. Okay, sorry about this. My internet is just unbelievable.
No worries. Can you stitch them together? Can you stitch it
Yeah,
up later?
yeah. We're gonna mend them. But anyways, I was saying this is a great, you know, this is like this toolkit from John is like an X-ray, right? You put the deal in, you ask these 3 questions, and you can know, like, are we gonna hit our number on this? Are we gonna close this opportunity? Or is our book of business, right? This is a very authentic, and this is very, you know, these are very simple questions. You thought like, oh, MEDDPICC is this like super fancy, complex thing, but no, it's very down to earth and questions that almost are laughable, that, you know, for somebody to ask themselves.
That's right. That's the beauty of these, right? These are simple questions. There's a simplification to all of them, but the outcome is so powerful, right? Because at the end of the day, you are trying to identify what's called implicated pain. You are trying to understand why they need to make this change, and you are trying to understand why they need to make this now. Absolutely. I think the beauty of John McMahon's book and his approaches is always simplicity, right? You take a simple, straightforward approach, very easy to train your team on, very easy for your team to understand and actually operationalize.
Right. So question to you, you know, about John's formula here. How do you differentiate between a real pain and like a fake pain? It's like, oh yeah, well, this is like something we want to solve and change, but but the business doesn't really care about it.
So when you say, so that's actually a good one, right? That's not really a real pain right there. That's a good question. Hey, we have this pain. You know, it's bothering us, but not enough to make a change, right? You know, in John's book, he has this very interesting quote, and I'm going to share it here, right? You know, in a sales cycle, he sits down with a CIO of a really large company, right? And they ask, you know, the CIO shares this one story with them, right? He says, when vendors come and talk to us, they think of me, the CIO, as a firefighter. A firefighter will go wherever there's a fire burning, right? Yeah. That's how they see. So if they see a little bit of pain, they might think, okay, I as the CIO, the firefighter, will go and, you know, turn up, put the fire out. But he says that's not really true. And that's what I think most of the vendors fail and miss. The CIO or any buyer is a forest ranger.
Yeah.
You can't put out all the fires. You have to focus on the largest ones, which have the most catastrophic impact. You have to see which are the small fires now, which will become big ones down the line, and which are already the big raging ones. So you focus your energy on those. You as the seller, me as the seller, we need to identify think of the buyer A as a forest ranger. Some fires are going to keep burning. They're not going to care, right? And B as the sellers need to identify which of these fires is big enough, is dangerous enough that, you know, the buyer would want to put out. Think of them as a forest ranger, not as a fireman. And I think that was such an insightful thing to kind of share. You know, it personally helped me kind of analyze buyer situations as well. You know, my boss right now, he says, are you bleeding from the finger or are they bleeding from the neck?
Exactly. And I love this analogy of a fire ranger. And I've seen a very cool application of this we'll talk about this in another video, but is using companies, public communications, like their investor relations or annual report, and say, these are our 4 initiatives for 2022. And that's what we're doing. So now, if you want to be selling anything into whatever that company is, go and find these 4 initiatives and make sure you fit. If you don't fit in there, you're not happening. So that's
right.
That's a great way to find that out.
That's right.
And let me ask you this. So in terms of the identification phase, oftentimes, right, if you're a CIO, you're evaluating different solutions, or yeah, right, for example, we mentioned a CRM. How do you know a company's not reaching out to you as a seller just to shop around? Like, okay, I got numbers from Salesforce, now you're Microsoft, I'm reaching out to you to get a number from you, but there's no real interest, they're just kind of trying to benchmark. Is there any way to gauge that?
So every industry is different in how they operate and what the processes are, right? A rule of thumb that I've personally lived by is, if they send you a blind RFP and you request that, hey, we would love to have a chat with people who are the CEOs of the problem. Don't have to be high up, people who are actually handling the RFP and managing the problem, not somebody in procurement. That does not count. Actual business buyers. If they do not agree to the call, you do not participate in the RFP. And, I'll have a counter answer being, what if one of those 100 become real deals? That's when the question of time management comes in. The simple argument that is, when trying to validate real interest, right, you have to talk to the buyer, the CEO of the problem. Right. Otherwise, procurement is just getting bids out so they can show it to your nearest, bestest competitor and go buy from them eventually.
Absolutely. How do you use the identification, right, the I in MEDDPICC, to help you forecast better? So soon, if you're at the end of Q3, how does that play anything into your planning?
That's a beautiful question. It takes me back to a deal that I did a couple of years ago. Usually when selling to like a really large enterprise, think of a Visa, think of a MasterCard, think of a American Express, since we're on the payment merchants gate here, right? I was trying to sell this big deal, right? And they come to me and they tell me, hey, we need to get this done in 2 months. And having been a part of legal processes, InfoSec processes in large companies, I'm like, what are you guys talking about? It'll take like 6 months just to get through done that, right? Like 3 to 4 months just to get through the legal and the security process. And they said, no, this absolutely has to get done in 2 months. And then, the 3 questions, right? Why now? What is the implicated pain? Like what is the consequence of not solving this now? Right? And why should they do anything? And then we figure out that they basically have a really large contract expiring in the next 90 days with another vendor. They're already behind their timeline to get to basically get a new tool in place before that contract expires, because they've decided to go off of the vendor because they've raised prices by like an astronomical account. The interesting thing is, because the implication of not solving the problem was so high, like potentially millions of dollars, somehow magically the legal red lines happened in the 2 months, the evaluation happened in the 2 months, and the deal was signed in the 2 months.
Wow.
Implication. If somebody has to walk away with one thing from this discussion, if you don't remember anything from identification of pain, just remember this. What is the implication? What is the consequence of not solving this problem? If the implication is $10,000 and your solution costs 50,000, yeah, you don't have a deal. If the implication is $1 million and your solution costs 150K to solve this, you have a definite deal.
Right. Okay. So you kind of answered, I had this other question, but you answered it. Like, what is the best type of pain to uncover? But you just said it here, right? If you have a real, if the outcome of this is mega and the millions of dollars, and especially if they're behind and have to change a vendor, then you're in a winning spot. And if you can identify that, your deal will go very fast, which sounds miraculous. Speaking of a massive company like an Amex or something of those levels.
Magic happens.
Hey man, sorry, we cut out again.
No.
Okay, let's squeeze in a couple more questions. I think this is great. So doesn't matter if a deal or an opportunity comes into you inbound versus outbound in terms of identifying of the pain, because right, they're very different in nature. Here you're fighting to get contact and to reach the right stakeholder versus pull coming from their side.
So great question, right? And actually, this is a very important point too, because oftentimes we see this chasm between inbound reps. Folks have always taken inbound leads and folks who've gone out and actually sourced outbound leads, right? And how to train them differently. So say somebody, a director level person is coming inbound with a real use case that, hey, we have this serious problem that we want to solve, right? Then I believe the identification is more around timelines, the consequence of it, right? Not really identifying if it's a real pain or not. It might be a good idea to kind of probe a little to make sure it's bleeding from the finger or bleeding from the neck, just to make sure that happens. But holistically speaking, like that is very important to understand. On the other hand, outbound, completely different story, right? They're not coming to you, you're going to them. And this, when you think of identification of pain, this is very much where consultative sales come in, right? You're not necessarily, pushing your product align to the product that you sell. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And no, that's fantastic. So Craig, this is really a wonderful toolkit. Applying this to if as a rep or even as definitely as a business. And I'm excited to see how we go further down the line. What will be our next focus after the I? On what will we?
We're going to be talking about metrics next. Everybody knows about it. Literally nobody finds that out, especially on the mid-market or early enterprise side. And I kid you not, it can have such a huge impact. So folks, we'll talk again next week about metrics.
Awesome. Thank you, Craig. This was fantastic. See you again next time.
See you soon, Sean.